According to the National Center for Drug Abuse, over 165 million Americans ages 12 and up are currently abusing drugs or alcohol. Of those 165 million Americans, there is a mom, dad, sister, brother, wife, husband, son, daughter, or grandparent praying and pleading that they would stop. Addiction is a subject most people don't like to talk about and is kept behind closed doors. But the Finding Hope podcast will bring light to the subject and give families that are living in shame, guilt, hopelessness, fear, worry, and anger tools and education to find strength, peace, happiness, joy, and hope. Hello, I'm Amy LaRue, Finding Hope Coordinator for Hope is Alive Ministries and your host for this Finding Hope podcast. At Hope is Alive, our mission is to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. We do this through our intentional next level sober living homes and faith-based support groups for the loved ones of addicts called Finding Hope. Thank you for joining us today. I want to remind you about two big events happening in 2025. We'll be celebrating 10 years of Finding Hope, and we'll start on March 28th with Night of Hope. This is a night of worship, encouragement, and hope. We'll kick off the night with musician Ben Fuller, followed up with inspiring words from Lisa Turkhurst. But it doesn't stop there. The next day, on March 29th, we'll have our first ever Hope Conference. We'll have amazing worship and keynote addresses from co-CEO Allison Lang, addiction specialist Amber Hollingsworth, and Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics officer Mark Woodward. We have many other surprises for you that night too. So you can get your tickets today at fh10year.com. But I have Darcy with us back today.
Yeah, thanks for having
me. And so we're so excited about that 10-year stuff,
yes,
right?
So
we have
excited.
Amazing things planned. But we're just going to kick it right in, okay?
Yep.
So this is going to be a podcast that we had a crunch and trying to get it in our 30 minutes that we like to do it. So we're going to be talking about the basics. And we kind of talked about it a little bit on our last podcast as we kicked off the year. And so what I like to call this is Recovery 411. What does it mean that a loved one of someone who struggles with addiction, you and I, need recovery? What does recovery look like? We think so much that recovery is just for those who struggle with addiction, right? But I always go to definitions. And so the definition of recovery is a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. So through your husband's addiction, were you in a healthy state of mind, health, and strength?
Oh, no.
You weren't?
No. Like you said, and I say when I talk to people on the phone or at my meeting, we are just as sick, if not sicker, than our loved one.
And if you're sick, you have to do something about it, right?
Right.
I know we're in the flu season right now,
Yes.
and Oklahoma's number one. Yay, Oklahoma.
Yay.
But when you're sick, you go to the doctor and you get better, right?
Right.
And so when our health and our everything isn't going well, we need to do something.
Yeah.
And so when we love someone struggling, so many times we make up the excuses. I'm not the one with the problem. I don't have time for it. You even said in your last podcast, I need to make sure everybody else is okay. Then I'll take care of myself. You know, on the airplanes, we've talked about too, like recently, a month ago, I was on the airplane and they always say, make sure that you put on the face, you know, the mask before your child. The flight attendant came up to me, asked me, what are you supposed to do? I was like, I've never had that happen. I was like, I'll put mine on and then make sure my child is okay.
Yeah.
And that's what this is, recovery. It's starting to take care of yourselves because we know when we love someone that's struggling, it comes in. It's almost like it slowly comes in and then we're stuck in this storm. Like we kind of see signs, but we don't know quite what is going on yet. And then all of a sudden, bam, we're in the storm. We don't know how to get out in our own health, our mind. Everything has is not taken care of.
Right.
I tell people I was so skinny. I was not eating. I was not taking care of myself. I was just living barely, right?
Yeah.
And so we need that. And the three things we're going to talk about today, we're not going to dig super deep. We'll do that on some other podcasts. But we're going to talk about the 3 things that I think are important to our own recovery, that these buzzwords that we get thrown around, that we need to really think through. So the first one we're going to talk about is codependency. So we share what the definition of codependency is?
Yes. Someone who has let another person's behavior affect him or her, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior.
Wow. That's a lot.
That is.
So you're letting someone else's behavior, so say you, affect me.
Right.
What I do, what I think, what I'll say yes to, what I'll say no to. I let that other person control me in a sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think a quote that I've read recently, it says, in all codependent relationships, the rescuer, so us as loved ones, right, need the victim, that person that's struggling, as much as the victim needs the rescuer. So we need them just as much as they need us. And when we're in this codependent, this cycle, and you talked about it, I think on the last podcast, about the cycle we get in. We get in this cycle of codependency where we might even say, okay, I'm not going to rescue. I'm not going to save them this time. Oh, but maybe just this one more time. And we start to, it doesn't feel right saying no.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like we're loving them if we don't rescue them, right?
Oh, 100%.
And so then, in a sense, we relapse and go back in rescuing, which gives them more, they're stuck in their cycle of addiction because they're used to it. Even though the cycle doesn't always feel comfortable, we almost know what to expect. And so it's hard for us to even change that because even when they're struggling and, we don't like it, it's almost like we become comfortable in this uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I'm afraid to say no. Like, what are they going to end up on the street? Yeah, they might, right? I'm not going to rescue them. Am I going to call their boss one more time? I'm going to save the day. I always say this is like, a codependent has on that superhero cape. I'm going to save the day, right? I'm going to save what's going on. I'm going to be the hero in this.
Yeah.
Where really our hero needs to be God.
Yes.
Right? He's the one. And sometimes when we have that superhero cape, when we're stuck in this codependency, we're getting in the way of God's plan. And we have to almost step aside and trust, even if our loved one falls, and our loved one will fall. Yeah. And we've just got to remember, okay, they're in God's hands right now and trusting our maker, right?
Yeah.
And so some characteristics, and I'm going to say this, like not everybody's codependent, right? A lot of us are, but not everyone is. And it's sometimes the first time I heard about codependency, I thought I had to have all of these characteristics. Oh, I only have 2 of them. I guess I'm not codependent. No, like if you have 1 or 2, you're most likely codependent, right?
Yes.
But that's for you to decide. And so let's just talk through some of these characteristics we have that we pulled up about what makes a person codependent. I think the first one is like just rescuing. I think we already said it. It's helping others. I think the first one is helping others at your own expense. And when I was talking through this with my group here in Oklahoma City recently, I said, you sometimes cancel your doctor's appointments. You cancel lunch meetings with friends. You are canceling things at your own expense. Yeah. You are trying to go help others when you're not helping yourself. Again, it's that face mask, right? So what's another one?
Difficulty identifying and asking for what you need.
Oh, that's interesting. You got that one, Darcy. Very interesting.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I still struggle with codependency, even after all these years. And so, we're so busy focusing on helping other people to distract us from what we really need.
And one thing, I was talking to a friend, and she's not even in Finding Hope, but non-Finding Hopers struggle with codependency too. And she's always wondered how, like, if someone says, it's in my Sunday school group, if someone says, oh, my kid's sick or someone passes away, what do you need? How can I help? And I said, I love what she does at the beginning of every year. She says, how was I as a friend? Ask 3 or 4 questions. And she goes, what can I work on this year? And I was honest with her. And I said, you need to ask for help too. You need to accept the help too. And I think that's where this codependency, it's difficult. It's sometimes you don't even know what you need, because that first part says a difficulty identifying. Yeah. And sometimes you might even be like, how do I even identify what I need? And it's taking that time, like what my friend even did. Like, what do I need? Yeah. And it's taking, every morning thinking through, like, okay, what do I need today? What do I need to do? Or before you go to bed, thinking through, what did I need today that I didn't get met? Like, personally, all those things. Yeah. And then being brave enough and bold enough to ask for help, because I think we have to remember we can ask for help and they can say yes, or they can say no. Yep. And that's okay. Another one is a tendency to be over responsible and not accept help. That kind of goes align with that. Yeah. Like, you're going to take on all the responsibility for this person. You're going to make all the appointments for them. You're going to make sure their bills are paid. And I did that with my husband. I had his phone, and sometimes I would have his phone and be like, okay, checking his calendar. Did you make this appointment? Did you follow up with that email? Like, I didn't check all his emails and do all that, but I was like constantly like being the responsible one. And he was intoxicated, but I didn't know that at the time. But like, I would be the one that would try to take over all of those responsibilities for him. What's another one?
A tendency to hide feelings of anger and disappointment to avoid rejection. Ooh, that one's so good. Like, we put
up that mask, and we've talked about it on this podcast. We put up a mask, and we're so good about that. My favorite one is going to the grocery store, and someone might say, "How are you?" Fine. Like, that's just our, because it's awkward when someone says, "Oh, I'm not fine." You're like, "Oh," but if you're not fine, and I tell people, even in Finding Hope, I say, when people ask how you are, it's okay to say, "I'm having a hard day, but I just don't want to talk about it." Yeah. Like, be truthful, because that will start to open up for them to maybe start sharing how they're feeling too in a safe place. Right. Part of codependency is to control people. Okay, I'm gonna be the superhero, but I'm gonna control this. What's that little puppet thing that's on strings? Marionette or something like that. Sorry if I got it wrong. But like, you're up here trying to control them. Yeah. And you're almost manipulating them. Yes, they manipulate us, but we're up here trying to manipulate, and to get the outcome we want. But we also have to remember, it might not be God's outcome. Right. And it's that, pray for the doors to shut, and for God to open the right doors. But when we're up here controlling, we might be putting them in a different path than they're supposed to go. Right. What's another one?
You start giving advice freely.
You mean, so I don't say, hey, like my friend does.
Sorry, I laugh because, you just see what's wrong and you try to, you're not really giving advice, but.
Yeah, that's part of the control. You're trying to control it in a sense, right? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're just going to give all that advice because you know better, Darcy, right? Right, yeah. But sometimes we don't.
Exactly.
And it's sometimes like, I will, when someone talks to me, I'll even ask, hey, we have to remember, I'm going to get back to what I might ask, but like, we have to remember God gave us ears to listen. Not always do we need to, and that's what I love about the beginning of Finding Hope, when we share how we're doing that check-in. It's just a free time to share without people constantly, you need to do this. And I know sometimes we go to meetings and we want people to tell us what to do, but a lot of the time we can't make that decision for you. And so sometimes it's just like, are you just here to share, or do you want me to share my thoughts on it? It's asking that question. Yeah. Like, do you want my thoughts on it, or are you just here to share? Yeah. And just ask them, and they can say either way, and you just got to be okay.
Well, 9 out of 10 times, they're just going to want you to listen. Yeah. And when you're listening and you're already thinking about your response before they're done, you're not listeing.
That's true, because you're missing details.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely. This one has been one I really work on a lot. And it says, focus, as a codependent, I focus on perfection, not progress. So I am a huge perfectionist. And what I recently learned last year is I've always been a procrastinator too. And that's because I'm a perfectionist. Yeah. And if I can't do it right, I just keep pushing it off, thinking it's not going to be perfect. Why do it? Because it's not going to be perfect, right? Yeah. And so, and I have to remember, like, my focus isn't on perfection. I'm going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I have to give myself grace like I give other people grace.
100%.
You know, and just focus on the progression of it instead. Give us one more.
So one that I struggled a lot with was I care too much about what other people think. And I shouldn't care. I have an audience of one.
And who's that audience?
And that audience is the Lord.
Absolutely. It is. And so how did you overcome that?
By just fully surrendering to him and listening to him and not care what other people thought. But what is he telling me to do? I'm only there to listen to him, not anybody else.
And that's that people pleaser.
100%.
Right? Like that goes to people pleasing right there is like, okay, I got to do it and all that. I actually had somebody come up to me recently and say, I've been avoiding you. And that was they're like, because of my codependency. Because, I just gave some feedback and it might not have been the feedback they wanted. It was honest feedback, and it wasn't about, like, it was feedback it wasn't about, like, giving advice. It was, the situation without giving all the details, but like it's that people pleasing in us too. And so we got to get moving, but like, how do you step out of that cycle? I think the first thing we have to remember is we have to redirect our focus. So where's our focus? Is our focus on that person and what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they should be doing, all of that? Is our focus on them? Or is our focus on us? And is our focus on God? Or is it just on them? Or they are God right now?
That's good.
So what's the next thing we can do?
Practice being yourself.
And what does that mean? And you have worked in 2024 on yourself, so share a little bit about that.
So being honest with what I need. Like what do you need every day to make it through every day? What do you need to do for you? I unashamedly say I go to 2 counselors. Like, I see 2 counselors. I run consistently. I changed my eating habits. You lost a lot of weight in your husband's addiction. I gained a lot of weight in mine. And so it's just finding what I need to do to make myself a better person and who God created me to be.
And finding yourself again.
Yeah.
We lose ourselves in it, right? That's so good. And then next one, so we talked on how you start to step out of this is redirecting your focus, start focusing on yourself. Be codependent with yourself. Ooh, I've never said that. That's kind of cool. I don't know if that's a thing. But
right. But it sounds good.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing I think is you've got to set boundaries.
Yes.
And setting those boundaries, and we're going to just talk about what a boundary is. A boundary is a place where your responsibility ends and another person's begins. And we had a really good podcast a while back about, like, it's a circle around us, right? It's a fence around us. It's a barrier around us to protect our well-being, right? And it tells others what we will allow and what we'll not allow, right? Yeah. And a boundary goes back to financially, spiritually, all those things, right? And so we have to remember that and it tells people, and they're not going to like those boundaries, are they?
Oh, 100%.
Because they're so used to pushing their way through and getting what they want out of it. They know how to push your button in a sense. Young kids are really good at that. But so are adults too. They know what to say. And sometimes it's worse as adults because it's mean. The words are hurtful and all of that. Yeah. And so when we set these boundaries, it starts to give your own power back. Again, finding yourself, like you're talking about, you setting those boundaries, what I'm going to allow, what I'm not going to allow. I'm going to start to find myself again. Allows you, I love this one, to make your own schedule.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like, like, I tell people, and I say all the time, like, what is, I set a boundary of when my phone goes on Do Not Disturb. And it goes on 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. But what I just recently started, I would get so tired. I'd be in bed by like 9:30 or whatever. And I would hear my phone. Bzz, bzz. And so what do?
You grab it.
So now what I've started to do is, because it automatically goes on at 10 p.m., is if I'm ready to go to bed, I turn it on. Do Not Disturb.
Good for you.
Even at like 9:30 or 9:15.
Yeah.
Just call me an old lady. I don't care.
No, that's good. I'm proud of you.
It's hard because, But then I go to sleep and I can sleep better that night. So it gives me my own schedule back as well. And it allows me these boundaries to go to my appointments.
Yes.
To have these lunch dates that we were talking about. So what else why we need boundaries?
The next two are really important to me. It gives you your self-confidence back. You know, we lose, like you've said, we lose who we are in making sure everybody else is okay, not setting boundaries, doing everything. But you're scheduled to get your confidence back and keeps your personal life safe. Like, I have a set schedule. I have what I'm going to do when I'm going to do it. And I have these boundaries of you're not going to interfere with that. And so I have my personal life back.
That's so good. That's so good. And it keeps us, why we need boundaries, it keeps us from going into the space of others as well. So it keeps us from trying to rescue them, that superhero cape, right? These boundaries, okay, I have this boundary, I'm not going to, right? It's going to keep us safe. And ultimately, why we need boundaries, it makes us healthy, right? You know, we talked about why we need recovery because we've lost it. Like we're not healthy anymore. So it keeps us healthy. And so there are actually 3 types of boundaries. You know, we have non-existent, meaning you just let anyone come in, walk all over you. You can't say no. It's just others have learned they can take advantage of you.
Yes.
You know, they're like, oh, they have no I'm going to just take advantage of them. You know, and I think we all know people that have taken advantage of us, and we see it, and it doesn't feel good. And sometimes you even know, oh, they're taking advantage of me, but you don't. It's because you don't have a boundary in place. What's another one?
A damage boundary, which it means it's inconsistent. So one that I had that I wasn't consistent about until the 4th time. Every time he would get arrested, I'd bail him out. Like every time. Till the 4th time, I finally was like, he thinks I'm going to bail him out every time. Yeah. And so I can keep doing this because my wife or my mom's going to keep bailing me out. If I have a DUI or whatever it might be, like they're going to kick me. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. And they know the exact words to say to you. Like, what worked last time for you to answer the call? What worked last time for you to come sign the paperwork for it? And so that last time I said no.
That's hard.
It is hard, but they have to see consistency in that, or they're just going to keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say it's like a hole, and they'll try, right, to push away, and then eventually they will, and the hole gets so big. Yeah, and then you're back to the non-existent boundaries. Yeah. And the boundaries we really need are intact boundaries, those firm, intact boundaries. And it's where, again, we've talked about it, where what it tells people what you're going to allow in and out. And so when we set these boundaries, we have to be firm and direct with them. And we use the words, and it's not, we don't use the word you, right? We use the word I. If I feel. Then I will. Not if you are drinking, then it's if I feel like we are not safe, then I will XYZ. Yeah. If I feel like you are talking to me and with harsh words, then I will not answer the call. And so we have to remember that. What else do we have to remember? We have
make sure there's consequences with our boundaries if a boundary is crossed. Like you said, my communication with mine is through text message a lot, and if he crosses that boundary, I just don't respond to his text messages because I respect myself. I respect myself enough now that I'm not going to listen to the way he talks to me.
Yeah, you don't deserve it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I've talked about people with boundaries before when I'm like, do you have any boundaries? And a lot of people don't, because again, they just all of a sudden, the storm's here and don't even know what to do with it. And so as I talk people through boundaries, I'm like, okay, yes, that's a great boundary, but what happens if it's crossed? Right. I don't know. It's like, okay, well, we've got to think through this. We've got to process what's going to happen if this boundary does get crossed. And, I tell them, go pray about it, go write about it, and then come back and, talk to me about it. Like I can't make your boundary. Right. And you can't make mine. Right. We might have the same situation happen, and I have a boundary for it and you might not. Right. And so we have to remember that these boundaries look different from person to person.
Yes. And that's okay. Like, I want them to know it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we've talked about a lot. Codependency, setting some boundaries so we can get out of that cycle of codependency. And what's the last one we're going to talk about?
Enabling.
Ooh, that's a fun
That's
one.
a hard one. Yeah. And that is doing for others what they can and need to do for themselves.
So a typical 25-year-old, right? Or a typical 30-year-old, what they can and should be able to do for them and need to do for themselves.
Yeah.
A 30-year-old can make their own doctor's appointment, right?
Yes.
My 7-year-old cannot.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And you also have to remember, I think, we also have some people that have young kids too, like that have teenagers and struggling with addiction. And just to know it does look different. And the boundaries look different and all of that. And we hear you and we see you. And so you just really have to think, okay, if it was another kid of mine or another, you know, and they were at this age, what can they and can they not do?
Yeah.
You know, and we enable, a lot of it sometimes is like we mean well, like we want to help. We want to help protect them, right? We want to fix the problem, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Like, okay, they got in jail, right? You know, and I want to help them. I want to protect them. I'm going to get them out so they don't have to sit there all night or all week.
Yeah.
Or,
I think we almost think too, if we help them, oh, they won't do it again.
Yeah, and that goes back to that manipulation. The boundaries getting pushed. Like, oh, I promised you if you bail me out this time, I will go to treatment.
Yes.
And then you hear that word treatment, and you're like, oh, they're going to finally go. But what happens when they really get out?
They don't go.
Yeah. Typically. I mean, there's cases that
some
they
do. But
You have to just remember that. And so I think it's important when we talk about enabling to know the difference between enabling versus helping.
Yes.
Right? And so enabling is hindering the growth in a person. And then helping is doing for others what they truly cannot do for themselves. Right? And so we wrote down some examples. So let's just quickly go through this. Okay. So enabling is putting their needs before your own, which some people are like, how is that enabling? But it is. Right? Because you're taking care of them. You're doing everything. And it's showing them that you don't matter, that they matter more. So putting their needs before your own. So what's helping?
Helping is going to speak to a counselor or attending a Finding Hope meeting.
Absolutely. You know, your loved one might say, hey, I need groceries right now. No. Okay. You can go get groceries. There's food pantries. There's places you can go.
Yes.
I'm going to my meeting tonight.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Enabling, bailing them out of situations and problems that come as a direct result of their addiction.
Yeah. And helping is allowing them to fully experience the consequences of their actions. So if you're always bailing them out, you're always tracking them where they're going, they're not going to get the consequences that they need to, maybe that's their rock bottom.
And that's hard because we know, like, as kids, like, you know, you and I have teenagers and young kids, and it's like, if they do something, they have a consequence. Right. And it might be losing their iPad. It might be sitting in timeout. It might be whatever, XYZ. And we do know as adults, our consequences are harder, bigger. But that's their consequence. Yes. Right? Not ours to feel. It's theirs to feel.
Yeah.
Enabling is parenting them and then resenting them in yourself afterwards. So you might be telling them what to do, what to, think, all those things, and then they not listen, and then you're just completely resentful. Or it might be giving them that money that one more time, and then they go do something else with it, and then you're resentful that they did that. So it would be helping.
Giving them love and true support. So when they're ready, you're there to support them and encourage them and love them.
Absolutely. To end our enabling helping, I'm just reminded of one of our residents, Hope is Alive residents, someone that was in our sober living homes. She came and spoke. She's actually on staff now. She came and spoke to her at a meeting, Finding Hope meeting, and she was just talking, sharing her story, and it was just so impactful. She ended, though, and said, my mom, how did she say it? When my mom stopped enabling me is when she found it. And I kind of flipped it on her. I said, your mom actually helped you by stopping enabling them.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's so true. Like, we actually are helping them when we no longer enable them.
Right.
You know, it sounds backwards, but it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, our enabling behaviors are not helping them in any way.
Right.
But when we allow them to fall, when we allow them to make their own appointments and all the things and lose their jobs. I mean, my husband lost his job and it was hard. Like, I was like, how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
But he had to lose it. And, but actually in the long run, it helped him, you know? And I think sometimes people will even ask me after they've been in Finding Hope for a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. We had someone call us or email me or call me, I can't remember. And she reached out and said, she just had a situation. She goes, Amy, I know this is enabling, not helping. She goes, but I just feel like I need to. And then that's when I went back to that resentful. And I said, well, if you do this and they don't do the outcome that you want, are you going to be resentful? And she had done so much work on herself that she was able to really think through that, what I had said, and make that decision. So it's like, if I get them a car while they're in sober living because they've been there for 6 months, am I going to be resentful if they leave? You have to think about that, because I see that all the time. They get a car from mom and dad because they've been in sober living, then they leave sober living.
Right.
And so it's thinking through, am I going to be resentful for this? And
that's good.
Trying to remember.
That's really good.
Okay, so this was a lot. So if you're listening, take a deep breath. There's a lot here. Go back and listen. Go back and take notes. But more importantly, reach out to us.
Yes.
And we will be happy to walk you through this, talk you through this, give you more help and support as you navigate all this. But I just want to remind you of the definition of recovery and why our recovery is just as important, if not more important.
Yeah.
It's because we need to return to that normal state of health, mind, and strength. We need to remember to step out of that codependency, set some firm and intact boundaries, and continue to ask ourselves, is this helping or enabling them? Any other thoughts or questions?
You're going to make it. You're going to get, it's scary to do all of that, but you will. And you'll feel, I've said this, I felt like there was an elephant on my chest for a really long time. And then when I finally started to set boundaries and I stopped enabling, I could finally take a deep breath.
You could breathe again. Yeah. And it's one of those too. This is one step at a time.
Yeah.
So if this is your first time hearing all this, I had a brand new family at my meeting when I taught through this. And I said, just take that one step.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, today I need to set a boundary. Okay, great. Get firm on that.
Yeah.
Then take that next step. Okay, I'm going to really think about how am I enabling? And then I'm going to figure out, okay, where do I need to stop enabling? And, or is this helping? Then take that next step.
Yeah.
So this isn't all of a sudden, okay, listen to this podcast. I'm going to stop being codependent. I'm going to set all these boundaries and stop enabling. No, take that one step at a time and your journey will get there.
Yeah.
And so our challenge for this week is, I want you to think about the first step. How do you need to redirect your focus? What do you need? The next one is, identify those enabling behaviors and what do you need to change? And practice saying no, period.
Yes.
Yeah, all right? And set up a new boundary. Think through your boundaries and think through the consequences of that as well.
Yeah.
Any other challenges for them that you want to share?
No, that's all really good. I love all of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again so much for joining us today. And you can learn more about Finding Hope at findinghope.today. But before you go, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review, share this on social media, and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss our next hope-filled episode. Thanks again for joining me, Amy LaRue, and Miss Darcy Stevens on this episode of Finding Hope. And remember, you're not alone. It's not your fault. There is hope.